and the memories were so vivid that I knew that even from the episode we did, it was written into the episode they wanted Jennifer to eventually take over the Stargate team. So I knew that by playing that part, eventually it might lead to a much larger recreation of the series or a film later on. So I spent a lot of time cultivating and making sure that even after playing Jennifer Hailey, I was always playing characters that were still respectful to Stargate and honoring that character so that I could come back to Jennifer Hailey if I ever had to.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, tell us about the audition process to land the role of Jennifer Hailey. Was it fairly rigorous? Was it a good look story behind it, or a good sort of story to tell, or
It
was it very?
it,
Was it
it
very?
was.
Yeah. Continue. Yeah.
It was very. I remember I got an audition for Stargate, and they sent me a ton of pages, much more than you normally get. I think I was given 15 or 20 pages, and I remember reading it and thinking it really reminded me actually of A Few Good Men. It was very well written, and I learned everything, and I was so impressed with how good the writing was for a female, especially such a strong female role. And I went in to meet the casting director, and all these women were there, and they all looked like sci-fi, 5'9", dark-haired sci-fi girls. And then they had brought me in, I guess, just as an option. And I met Paul Weber, who's a wonderful casting director. And I started to read the scene, and he said, Elizabeth, none of these scenes are the scenes that we've been reading. I said, Paul, these are all the scenes they gave me. And he looked at me and said, just read what you have. And so we essentially read three scenes that they didn't give to anyone else. And I got a phone call, a wonderful audition. I got a phone call from my agent, I think a week later, saying that oddly enough, they were having trouble deciding if I could be on the show because I was the smallest person they had ever cast on Stargate. They'd always had very tall people. I don't know. But I guess they fought over me, and Peter Zeloise and I know Peter Zeloise said that he fought really hard because he really wanted me, and also every person on the cast was so wonderful to me. We had such a good time together.
Yeah.
Richard G. Anderson also said, I remember when I met Richard and he said, I want you to know that I made sure that when I guess they show Richard every single guest star because he's a producer, and he literally said to me, I want you to know I made sure to say, please hire the person who is the smartest and the absolute best. He was so sweet.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, that first episode in particular, you spend an awful lot of time working with Amanda Tapping in terms of that episode. What was that sort of like, and was it easy to click with Amanda straight away in terms of forming that chemistry on set?
Amanda's a very wonderful, easy person to work with. Right away, she makes everybody feel very comfortable. We had such a lovely time. She's very easy. Every person on that show, actually. Amanda's wonderful, very easy to connect with. I think that she was excited because she had an episode where it was about reminding her of who she used to be. And my character was supposed to be a character that reminded her of who she was. And there's a little bit of conflict for her as well. So she's such a smart, intelligent person. We just had a lovely time together.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, was it? I mentioned mentioning seeing some of the casts, and we know the iconic Richard Dean Anderson. But you're a young female
Yeah.
actress at the time, and seeing the sort of larger than life sort of characters and personalities can be sort of daunting at one stage. What was it like meeting Christopher Judge? Just the sheer size of the man, the sheer frame of the man. Obviously, he probably towered above you. It was almost like a giant in the beanstalk in terms of the scenario, in terms of Christopher Judge. And he was very much a jovial sort of a character rather than the serious character he played on set. And did he make you feel at ease, or did you have much interaction with him?
He was really wonderful, actually. Thank you for asking. When I met him, he was lovely. And I'll be honest with you, when I first worked with him, like when we were just speaking, he's lovely. But when I first worked with him, I remember looking at him, and he had this, of course, he had all his makeup on and everything. And he's such a glowy, beautiful, wonderful person. I almost began to laugh because he's so full of good energy. But he's very focused and very wonderful. Everyone on that show is very smart. and very connectable. And they made everybody feel like they belonged. There was no ego on that set ever.
And Elizabeth, in terms of your first episode, you go into this outer sort of world, and dare I say, you come under attack by these forms of energy beings and lights. In terms of that, what was that like in terms of the shooting of that? Did you have to sort of imagine it, or did they have glowing, sort of flickering lights that you could sort of pretend in terms of what you were seeing, or those sort of off-world sort of sets that they had set up for you?
I remember we had these very good props because we're great prop people. But it's with the Stargate, I believe it's always about the imagination, because that whole episode was about how you imagine the idea of light attacking you. So I always spent time thinking of everything before we did it. So it was always in my mind, and that she was full of the imagination of understanding, because Jennifer Hailey really gets things at such a high molecular quantum level. So everything would be in her mind before it was even there. And the whole point of the episode was that everything she was imagining was actually coming real.
Mm.
And Amanda was actually showing it to her. So a lot of that episode was all about everything that was in her mind coming true.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, the second episode, when you came back again in 2002, a year later, was there a bit of a surprise? Did you, after the first episode, did you get an inkling that there could be a chance of being a recurring recurring actress in Stargate, or did you feel after the first episode that it was a standalone episode?
Well, it does say in the episode they wanted Jennifer Hailey to take over the whole Starfleet.
Mm.
And I still get messages for that often. So, but actually, I had met one of the writers of Stargate and his lovely wife, and he had written me back into, I think they were going to write me into many episodes, but something happened, and then they gave a storyline to Courtney with Amanda to give her a love interest.
Okay.
But I think the plan was always to make sure that in the future I was coming back to be back a part of the Stargate. So I always expected to come back.
Yeah. And when you heard that they were doing a spin-off series in terms of Stargate Atlantis, were you aware of that at the time? Did you audition for that in terms of Stargate Atlantis? You consider for that?
I didn't, but I think they were very, I don't know, did they include people from SG1 into Stargate Atlantis? I think they really wanted a completely different group of people. They wanted all of the universes, it felt like, to be fairly separate. Jennifer Haley's really a part of the universe of Stargate, the original Stargate, from what I understand.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, in terms of the second episode now, and coming back into on the main sort of set and the Stargate set, and making your way around the corridors in terms of that sort of prep, in terms of the evasion sort of episode, I imagine those sets were very sort of big in terms of the second time going around. And did you ever feel at one stage you were going to get lost?
Oh, very much. That they were huge sound stages, and we were given these amazing guns to use. It was super fun, and we always had incredible ADs to make sure that we didn't get lost, because all of their sets were sort of like a maze the way they were built. It was, the whole episode was sort of like a labyrinth.
Yeah.
It was very wonderful. They make it very tactile. All the props are real. It was a very good, very engrossing experience.
Yeah. And that second episode, you also starred alongside Courtney J. Stevens, Grace Park, as we know from Battlestar Galactica, and David Kopp as well. You were the sort of cadet team in terms of that, working with Richard Dean Anderson. I imagine that sort of whole sort of Doom-like scenario, that RPG shoot 'em up type episode. I imagine that's an awful lot of enthralling, an awful lot of fun to play, in terms of that it almost feels like dare I say banks and robbers, cops and robbers, that you're almost playing in the schoolyard.
I really wanted to, because the first episode was so serious and so intense, and Jennifer was such a strong character. I really wanted to bring in more fun for her, so that the audience could get to know that she wasn't just this overly aggressive, angry person. I wanted to show that her relationship with all of the Stargate team had changed. She'd already been embraced by the Stargate team, and actually, my character is the only character that isn't actually being tested, because the whole episode is about how we're testing all the other members of the Stargate team to see if they make it onto the test team. So I really wanted to give a feeling that Jennifer had really grown under the mentorship of Amanda and Richard's characters.
Yeah. And I suppose, Elizabeth, now looking into the future in terms of Stargate, I've seen now in recent years that now at this time that we've seen animated series pop up in terms of other sci-fi popular shows. We have a Star Trek Prodigy sci-fi series now, an animated series based on the original Star Treks. It seems to be a growing sort of trend in terms of maybe animated series in terms of original Stargates, original sci-fi shows. If an animated opportunity or project came about in terms of Stargate, or a different sort of timeline that involved the Jennifer Hailey character, would that entice you to maybe to lend your voice to that in terms of doing some bit of voice work and being part of being an animated sort of character and in terms of a TV series?
I really love Jennifer, and it's so sweet you're asking me. I love Jennifer Hailey because I feel like that character is so important to show the energy and the science and the value of that type of character. Anything that they would ask me for Stargate to do, I would be more than thrilled to do. I feel like now that we're exploring Prodigy, and it's not just this, they used to write characters where if a character was almost too smart, they were turned into sort of a pariah or an outsider of some kind. I really love anytime I see a script where someone with an amazing brain is fully embraced and the ideas are shared, because the sharing of ideas in sci-fi is what makes sci-fi so special for people.
Yeah. And Elisabeth Rosen, final question now before I let you go. Let's pretend the character Jennifer Hailey was put into an imaginary Stargate encyclopedia, a dictionary as such, and they left two blank sentences under her name in terms of a synopsis. What would you like those two sentences to read to describe the character Jennifer Hailey if you were to write them?
That's a very good question, James. So I'm impressed. I would want Jennifer Hailey to be a brilliant futurist.
Jennifer Hailey to be a brilliant futurist. And if she was across the street from you, walking down across the street, and your daughter said, "Mammy, who is that?" What would you say? What type of a woman is she?
I would say that she's a leader and a prodigy. I would say that she's a leader amongst the people, and a